Good morning again, and welcome. If you would make your way over to your table with your friends and colleagues, we're going to get our morning program underway for our 2020 Symposium. If we haven't met, my name's Tom Danowski. I'm with the Oregon Wine Board. And we're always glad when we get a chance to come back together during these two busy days. It's absolutely gorgeous outside. No chance of snow like we had a few years ago. So thank you for everyone for making it in and being on time. I'm sorry to those who had to wait in line to get badges. That surge is just always hard to predict in the morning. But we'll have our friends coming in and joining us, and we're going to get underway with our first speaker. The Oregon Wine Board is governed by 9 volunteer directors who are appointed by the governor. And anybody in the industry can apply for one of those 9 seats to be considered by the governor. There's an industry nominating committee that is often asked for advice, and it's made up of 13 individuals from all over the state. Once those 9 board members are appointed, they go through an annual period of review and careful discussion, and from amongst their number of 9, they elect 4 executive officers. The chairman typically gives the greeting here at our wine symposium. If you have not met this year's chairman, you're in for a real treat. I'm not sure, certainly in my tenure and perhaps ever, that the Oregon Wine Board has had a chair from the Columbia Gorge. Our chair is a full-time pilot for Delta Airlines. He flies 777 jets all over the world. You may have heard him over the loudspeaker if you ever fly internationally on Delta. But he comes to us from the Hood River area by way of the Delta Crew Lounge. He's absolutely got the right stuff, and I hope you'll join me in giving a hearty welcome to Captain Bob Morris.
Well, thank you, Tom. At least you didn't introduce me as a wide-bodied captain. I'm still a little sensitive about the physique. It's really an honor to work with Tom and our very talented OWB staff and really a devoted board of directors. We have such a dynamic industry, and particularly this time, it's going to be for an exciting year. My job is to really talk about who makes this happen, and we cannot do what we're doing without great sponsors. And in a little bit, I'm going to introduce our lead sponsor for the event today. It takes a lot of friends to move Oregon wine along, and not just with our sponsors, but also where we get grant funding from. And we're going to talk a little bit about who we get that from and what we do with it. This is a look at our financial picture, and you can look at the funding from 2016 to the projected funding here for 2020. And back in 2016, we were multiplying our tax revenue, the revenue we're getting from the grape tax, by another 25% in grant funding. Now, in 2020, that's projected to be another 50% in grant funding. So our total funding in terms of grants is like $1.1 million for 2020. That is what allows us to do so many things. Who do we get these grants from? Well, we're getting specialty crop block grants. We're getting the license plate funding off of the Oregon Wine Country license plate, and a whole bunch of USDA funding. In fact, if you're going to see a USDA booth out there in the lobby, I thank them for the support that they give. The legislature is always, not always, but is frequently given us some money for market access and research. So these are all important funding sources, and a big call out to Marie Chambers and Jess Wiley for all that they do to put these grants together. That is what enables us to do our programs. What are those programs? Well, we have the wine touring guide, the resource studio that's online, the WISE Academy courses that we have done, international travelers, both inbound and also our outbound missions. And we have, I think we have three trips that are going to go to Canada, different provinces this year. We just came back from Mexico City. So there's a lot of opportunities for you and your businesses to join some of these international trips and see about getting distribution in those countries. I'd like to thank the generous sponsors that we have had, and we have sponsors for our Wi-Fi network today. And if you haven't already done that, I urge you to sign up on the Wi-Fi. Also, we have the program of Socio. And Socio will allow, you don't have to carry that brochure around with you for the entire event. You can put it on your iPhone or whatever your phone is, and you can track what the events are. And if you sign up on Socio, there's going to be a number of different, there's going to be a drawing, and there's a number of different prizes. There's going to be an hour consulting with Wise. I mean, that's a $350 value. A subscription to the Wine Spectator magazine provided by Wine Spectator. Gift basket of the salt products from Jacobson Salt. Some creatives, and also a gift bag by Chemeketa Wine Studies Program. So these are all different drawings. Go ahead and use that Socio app. I put it on my phone, and I noticed that don't use the hashtag in order to find this particular symposium. Just put Oregon wine as your search, and it will pop up, and then you can have it, and you can message other people, you can write your reviews of the different sessions, you can see what's up next. It's a really great program. And also, if you're one of those social media people, for Twitter or Instagram, you can find us at Oregon Wine Symposium, or use the hashtag #OR Wine Symposium. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of today's general session, Jim Aggers of Wine Direct is going to talk to us a little bit about their operation, and a warm round of applause for Jim, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jim. Wine Direct is really happy to sponsor the Oregon Wine Symposium again. We get to go to dozens of events like this, and this is by far my personal favorite and one of the best, because the Oregon Wine Board does an amazing job at balancing content, commercial opportunities, and networking, unlike any other organizer. Frankly, the only thing I think they could do better is maybe have the Tortilla Express open so we can enjoy tacos during Rob McMillan's talk as we crunch along to the data. Rob's going to have some great information about the state of the industry and a lot of the challenges wineries are facing today. But we at Wine Direct firmly believe that there are tons of opportunities still available that are untapped for wineries, especially wineries selling direct to consumer. In our 2019 Wine Direct DTC report, we highlighted the #1 opportunity available to wineries selling direct to consumer today is increasing their online sales. So why do we feel that's important, and why is that a great opportunity? #1, the average order value of a website order is greater than a tasting room order. It's greater than a typical wine club order. So what does that mean? It means you can just make a small change and see a great outsized improvement in top line sales. Now, this report that we did, we looked at data from over 1,800 wineries, $1.5 billion in DTC sales transactions. So the data we see here applies to all wineries and provides great insights. One of those insights is most wineries, or actually all the wineries in the study, their website sales are about 10% of total. Now, when you compare that to other industries like books or luxury goods, or even fast-moving consumer goods and consumables, it's tiny. It's very easy to see in other similar luxury industries, 10, 30, 40, 50% of sales coming through the online channel. So that can be a nice bar that we set together as an industry for all of our businesses. Now, how fast should you be growing your online sales? 25 to 50% is a realistic growth target when you compare to other fast-moving consumer goods. just take a look at grocery, of which wine is part of that category. There are literally millions and millions of new consumers every year just learning to buy groceries online, including wine and alcohol. So there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to find your brands with the right kind of strategy. And by the way, it's much more economical to build a huge and thriving DTC online sales program than, say, build a brand new tasting room or build out the experiences. While important, certainly you could spend about 1% of the money that one would spend on a new tasting room in online sales and see a tremendous input. So as I wrap up, success in the DTC channel, particularly selling online, requires a commitment to some small, often overlooked things that, in our view at WineDirect, it requires a trusted, experienced partner that's dedicated to DTC. Number one, compliance, and I'm not just talking about regulatory compliance, ADA compliance, new privacy laws shifting, security threats to consumer data increases every day, thanks to whoever you want to blame that on, depending on what your favorite news source is, and of course, fulfillment services. If you want to express your brand, you're going to need a fulfillment partner that can help you do that and ship fast and accurately. Now, as I wrap up, I did want to leave one note and say, there is kind of a difficult truth in all this growth in online sales and shipping cases of wine directly to a consumer's front doorstep, and that's a sustainability challenge. And there is a tremendous carbon impact when you ship a case of wine to someone's doorstep, and if you're doing it tens and thousands of times a year. So that's why WineDirect took it upon ourselves to purchase carbon offsets for each and every shipment that we make. So what does that mean? Of the 1.5 million shipments that we ship through our network, we went ahead for our customers and offset that carbon impact by investing in carbon recapture projects all over the United States. Why do we do this? Well, number one, it's important to us as a business. It's important to our customers. More and more wineries are making sustainability one of their top priorities. And then, of course, it's very important to the modern consumer. We couldn't be more proud about doing that, both for the industry and our customers in general. So please come visit us today in the trade show, booth number 238. We'll be happy to fill you in on details of the upgrade to our e-commerce platform, why we think security and compliance should be a cornerstone of your e-commerce and go-to-market in DTC, and then, of course, find out why sustainability and brand expression needs to be a key part of your fulfillment strategy in 2020 and beyond. Thanks for having us. We're pleased to support the event, and I'm going to turn things over to Rob McMillan from Silicon Valley Bank. Rob is the Executive Vice President and founder of the Wine Program, and right now he's going to share his unique perspective and data-based conclusions on the industry, state of the industry. And with that, I give you Rob. Thanks, everybody.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Am I on? We'll have to make some adjustments. I have to tell you, I am so grateful to be up on the stage this year. I'm so grateful because I'm in a unique region, a region that has growth. And I have to tell you, speaking in some of the other venues is becoming more and more difficult because we're a good news industry. We like good news. The other reason I'm really happy to be here is because a week ago I was in Hong Kong. And I got out, but I have to tell you that means I've been 7 days and 14 days is the quarantine, so don't shake my hand today. So I'll be interested to see what I have to say because this is the first time I've given this speech. We talked about this right now. Who would have thought 15 years ago that you would say that Oregon is the envy of every region? There's things that Oregon has done and continues to do which set it apart, and I think you guys should all be super proud of it. I've been excited to watch your growth since I started coming up here in the early 90s. Starting with, it's ebullience, by the way, change in Oregon sentiment. So we do a survey each year, and this is the survey results just for Oregon. And you can see year over year how Oregon is viewing the industry right this second. So the economy, people are saying, okay, that's affecting us a little worse than last year. Consumer demand is pretty good still. Sales channels, seems like you guys have access to channels, so everybody's positive on that. Grape supply is increasingly positive. I'd say it also stands, it's also a measure of the fact that you're increasingly getting to this point of being in balance, meaning that the growth rate in supply and the amount of non-bearing acreage that's coming on is starting to hit more of a balance point, so that's a little bit of a danger sign. It's yellow, I'd say. Labor is a problem for everybody. It's not a surprising thing. Alcohol laws are really not working in our favor. Capital, though, everybody can seem to find capital. These are kind of consistent across the regions, all the regions. Foreign competition, not as much of a problem from the Oregon view. Substitutes are being beer, wine, spirits, White Claw, and cannabis. And overall, ebullience. The industry is ebullient. However, if I look at the same chart and I add in the way the industry feels, that's what it looks like. So the industry is incredibly pessimistic. You guys are on an island right this second. The tide is rising and you're on the peak of the mountain. And so it's kind of good news, but it's, at the same time, I think you can learn a little bit from what's happening around us. Off-premise sales. So this is what we're looking at right now by the point of origin. You can see all the red lines, or all the red data points. Those are declining growth rates. It's not so much on dollars. Case volumes down, dollars are a little better, but you can see the growth rate in domestic at 0.7. This is for a whole year, so less than 1%. Washington's got negative growth. Italy, Australia, France, Argentina, Chile, Spain, and Oregon, the one spot. 12.4% value and 12.2% volume growth. That's pretty good. And New Zealand's the other one. But those are the only two places of origin that actually have positive growth rate in the wine category. So that's pretty good. This is for off-premise. In the surveys, when we ask, what are you guys going to do in terms of dollar sales and case sales for the year, you're actually pretty honest. The rest of the industry actually comes in higher. They say they're going to finish higher. When I actually get the data, it shows some different numbers, but these are, again, pretty strong numbers. Direct-to-consumer stats. These are eye-popping to me. Price per bottles, this is just 1 year, 3.6% growth, volume 10% growth, value 13% growth. Again, this is DTC, direct-to-consumer. Market share, 6.6. Again, Oregon's smaller than the other regions, but this is the one that I think is really cool. 2011 to 2019 compound growth rate, 35.7%. That's a hell of an investment. That's you guys that have invested your time and money into it, you're seeing return. Now we start to look at tasting room visitation. Napa County is dropping in visitation. Sonoma County is dropping in visitation. There's some structural issues that have to be addressed in those regions. British Columbia is a more new region in the way they're handling direct-to-consumer, so they're seeing some up. Oregon is up in terms of number of visitors. Washington is also up in terms of number of visitors. So generally speaking, emerging region, the way that consumers think of emerging regions anyways, those are up. Great news. This is what growth rate looks by dollars. So 25 million, 52 weeks per year, and it's kind of holding a little bit more flat now. It doesn't have the same growth rate as it did a year ago. So great results today, but Oregon is part of the wine industry, and the industry is hitting a ceiling. So while I'm giving all these great platitudes about Oregon, I think you have to look at the industry if you want to see what's coming, because you guys are in the industry. You have the same consumer. So it's critical to see what's happening there. Today, U.S. wine consumption at best is flat. This is U.S. wine consumption by volume. Oregon, what kind of consumers? I used to think that Oregon was attracting younger consumers. It feels like a younger vibe, more green, maybe. And turns out you're attracting the exact same consumers as other regions. Gen X, this is just for Oregon, Gen X is up. Boomers is flat to down. The mature gen, my mom's gen, still living, she hates it when I talk about anything trending down for her generation, but it is. And then millennials, that's the problem. We're not attracting millennials, and Oregon is not attracting millennials. By the way, millennials are up to 38 years old now, so they're not in footed pajamas, eating cereal still. They are legal drinking age, and we have to do a better job. Total off-premise wine sales, trends to present. So this is, I showed before, total wine sales. This is off-premise again. Volume turned negative in 2017. Value is flattened. This is value. And there is some channel shifting, but we have gone negative in terms of our volume sales for the first time probably since 1993 as an industry. We have to be alert to why and understand those reasons. Part of it is channel shifting. This was off-premise. Some of that isn't picked up, and so private label is one of the things that's not picked up very well in that data. So private label, this is the growth rate in private label, pretty substantial. Why is private label growing? Because consumers, whether you're a boomer and hitting retirement and more frugal, or a young consumer that's still on this kind of a delayed pathway into your career and still looking for some sort of wealth where you might be attracted to wine, you're looking for value, from a dollar standpoint, and value in private label shows. So this is kind of expected, and that's part of the reason why our volume has shifted the way it has. Who is the consumer today? This is one that I had lost track of. Being a wine consumer really most of my life, I actually wasn't aware that how people had actually shifted to being more general consumers. And today, 60% of consumers drink across categories. They drink beer and wine or wine and spirits, but they drink two categories. And that's really critical to recognize because our competition isn't so much foreign wine, it's not so much cannabis. Today, honestly, our competition is spiked seltzers and spirits. That's what we have to compete against. Population. So understanding this is another important component to figure out where we're headed. So I've broken out each of the different cohorts so you can see where those are. And then here's the boomer cohort. It peaks at age 58, and then the young consumer peaks at age 28. I think the median millennial right now is about 32. The median boomer is 66, which happens to be normal retirement age for the boomer. And I put this at age 40 because what we see, if you look at those, every single year now, for the next decade, we will have an increasing number of boomers hitting normal retirement age and an increasing number of young consumers crossing age 40. And you would expect when they cross age 40 that they would be wine consumers because that's the way it's been, right? And as I say all the time, hope is not a strategy. We have to have a strategy for attracting these young consumers. Category sales growth. This is beer. That uptick, by the way, is all due to seltzers, spiked seltzers. It's nothing else. That's what's growing that category. Wine is actually trending down. And then there's spirits. So spirits still, as a category, has the best growth rate. And that's not the way it's been. Wine has had dominant category growth for a long time, and spirits have looked across the river at us and said, gee, how come they're doing so well? What is it that they're delivering that we're not? And by the way, we get to do direct-to-consumer. It's much more difficult for beer and spirits producers to do direct-to-consumer. So we have the things that could make us successful and historically have made us successful, but we're somehow losing the new battle. Part of it is because wine is per serving is twice more expensive than spirits or beer. That plays into it. Now, I don't believe that we need to drop our forward price on a bottle to attract a new consumer, but we have to change our value proposition. We've lost the notion of wine being good for you. We've lost that battle. Most of us in this room probably remember the days back in the 90s, maybe two-thirds of us, where the French paradox came out and the Mediterranean diet came out. And there's some work by Arthur Kanzler, who also showed that moderate wine consumption was better for you than actually abstention. But we've somehow gotten off of that path, and we've stopped talking about that, and to our own disadvantage, because now the World Health Organization is coming out with substantial amount of paid science that is counter to that other science. And people say, well, it's science. But when you read an article that says one bottle of wine a week is like smoking 10 cigarettes, and that's science, that's paid science. But that's the kind of sound bites that get out there now. And so wine isn't as healthy in a young consumer's mind compared to White Claw. Think about that. Wine is not as healthy as White Claw. That's the way a young consumer thinks. Here's what's happening with spiked seltzer growth. We're up to $14 billion in roughly 4 years. Crazy, crazy growth. Everybody's kind of piling on the brands now. What else is growing? Wine in cans. There's a couple of good size can producers up here. One of the things that is interesting about cans to me is not only occasions, because cans go in certain occasions, but somewhere along the line, in order to get trial, we've got to stop to think about how we get a single serving. Somehow we've got to get to that point. Cocktails and the spirits producers are into the single servings, and they're doing great. We, as an industry, don't want to put fine wine in cans. Maybe it's a bad idea. I don't know. But I remember one day when Plumjack Winery in Napa put screw tops on their reserve Cabernet, and they still have screw tops on their reserve Cabernet, and they still sell it. It ended up being a heck of a big public relations advance for them, as a matter of fact. But this is another thing that we have to think about anyways. It does break down the price barriers for those young, frugal consumers. They're not going to go buy a $45 bottle of wine when they maybe can buy, if they have a $5 can, maybe that will get them to consume. They don't even have to come into your tasting room. And by the way, tasting rooms end up being one of the issues that I keep talking about that is a block. We actually require our consumers to come to our production facility to taste our wine, to get on our wine club, and then we try to keep them for as long as we can. Name another industry that's analog like that, where you have to go to the producer to actually buy. What would happen if I had to go to Detroit to get my car? Right? I'd be riding a bike. That's the fact of the matter. So we have to find ways around, for the new consumer coming at us, we have to find ways around them actually coming to our tasting room in order to include them in the way we sell wine. This is what's happening right now with on-premise spirits and wine. You can see on-premise wine has actually dropped below zero, so it's got negative growth rate. Spirits slowing. On-premise is a particularly sticky problem because that's where price really shows up with the markups. So we have this leveraging effect on our price. And especially young consumers, but aging boomers as well, they're not going to pay those kind of markups. And the buy the glass programs start to fail in the face of a cocktail or a craft beer for that matter. And so that's a particularly sticky situation we've got to find our way around. We used to say that we were going to do trial, by the way. Go backwards if I can. We used to say that we were going to do trial, with wine, and we'd get it in front of the consumer. Maybe that would be a way to get them to try what we had to offer. But now, in order to make sense at a price, when we recognize the price comparison, oftentimes what we do is we take a lower quality wine to get it into a buy the glass program. But our thought was still we're trying to get that wine into the consumer's mouth to explain who we are as wineries. So that's kind of counter to that whole thing when you're taking a lower quality wine and trying to introduce a consumer with the lower quality wine. Growth and share of formats. This plays to old and young drinkers. So if you look at the growth rate in 375 and 500 ml, 500 ml includes Tetra Pak, by the way. Same comments though. 375, a split, that's a nice purchase. It takes down that high price barrier, cuts it in half roughly, and maybe a younger consumer or an emerging consumer or a consumer that is already kind of interested in wine and wants to step up, that's an opportunity to try. Same thing with the 500 ml. I've always thought that 500 ml would be an interesting place to be because when I first started drinking wine, my wife and I would sit down and we could drink about a half a bottle. Now I drink a bottle by myself, but that's a different thing. But I think for most consumers, if you're in a restaurant and you had a 500 ml, you could have a white and a red at dinner, and maybe attack that price category just a little bit more. 3 liter is mostly the box program, and again, that speaks to that frugal consumer. Whether it's boomer or young, that's frugal into those boxes. Private label is part of that. Varietal growth and share of market. This is what's happening with varietals right now. You can see Pinot Noir is actually has a negative growth rate overall right now. I'm not saying Oregon Pinot Noir, you guys are special. We've already defined that, so hold off on that. But this is what's growing right now. It's Prosecco, Rosé, sparkling. Why is sparkling growing? Lower alcohol, and in a glass of sparkling, or pardon me, a bottle of sparkling, you get more servings than you do in a 750 bottle of wine, smaller glass. So it's more festive too. So it starts to play to that young consumer's values. This is the way consumption has always looked in our minds. We start with beer and spirits and then we advance to wine. That's the way we've always thought. That's not the way my parents' generation were. They were beer and spirits drinkers, and that's where they stayed. They drank gallons of wine because they bought wine by the amount of ethanol you had. Matter of fact, that's where I learned my math. My dad would take me to the store, and he was explaining proof to me. It's like, well, it's 50%. You got to take half of the 40 proof. It's actually 20% alcohol. That was my beginning of math. So this is beer, liquor, wine, and cannabis. I threw cannabis into this that I got from a separate source, but just to show you, when we start to think about where cannabis might impact, it does impact perhaps the young consumer. When you look at the average cannabis user, the typical description is 26 and male, non-college educated often, and household income below $75,000. A little bit different than the current wine consumer description, but you can see that really with cannabis, it's about for legal adults, it's about 13% who are regular consumers, and with alcohol, it's about 60% that consume. So you're not going to have that 13%, really impact that other part. Even if they switched all out. And by the way, cannabis has been around for a while, and so now even though it shows up legal, doesn't mean that it didn't happen before. So I don't see that cannabis is all that big of a deal. It's a small deal. It's not helping. This is what we have with our young consumers right now. They're starting to press on non-alcohol. They're looking at this better for you component. So it shows up in a lot of different things. And then we have these mindful events, Dry January, Sober Curious, Sober September. These are the kind of messages that are coming out right now with respect to alcohol beverage. And we've left the French Paradox Mediterranean diet pretty much in the dust at this point. And our marketing is going to have to change in order for us to overcome some of these feelings. In survey work that's done by Harris and Nielsen, they asked, what's your view of wine? Are you cutting back? And those that said they're cutting back, they cited health as the main reason, opting for a healthier lifestyle. And there's another part of them that they say health-related reasons. It might be illness, medicine, some other things, but health ends up being the reason. So alcohol now is, as a category, viewed unhealthy. For those that do drink, we have to appeal to them in the better for you category, and we're not. Got that? I mean, we've lost that voice. When White Claw is better for you than wine, we're making a mistake. Young consumers, by the way, are also more ethnically diverse, and there is opportunity with Hispanic and African American in particular to to do a better job there. So how do we change the message? So I've thrown out some values and what was the boomer value, what's the millennial value, and what's the action. So support group for a boomer is family. Support group for millennials, friends. My generation ended up, blowing up family, 50% divorce rates, and not surprisingly, the young consumer found their strength in a community of friends. And so when you start to think about how does that impact you, well, if you are bringing friends and in your wine club, you're figuring out how to create lateral communication. If you get events where your friend is attending, it's really hard for you to get out of that wine club because you're locked in because of that, your friend is in there. So that helps extend the lifetime value of a customer if you're thinking about ways to increase that lateral socialization. And by the way, that third-party review and third-party reference also kind of grows on itself. Choice in food. My generation said, well, it's not bad for you. I can eat donuts. And, young generation is only eat if it's good for you. They want to know where things are sourced. They want to know that it's non-GMO, it's healthy, et cetera, et cetera. And so for us, that means ingredients, calories. We have to get back to the better for you. In business, capitalism is the path to wealth. The young consumer's wealth comes with social responsibility. So now we have to start talking about what is our social reason to exist. It can't just be make money. That was my generation. There has to be a social reason. And by the way, we have this problem, this lifestyles of the rich and famous problem. Maybe it doesn't exist as much up here. But to the extent that it does, the young consumer in particular is kind of put off by wealth. They're put off by the billionaires. You guys hear the political ads, millionaires and billionaires. Anybody that's been successful is hammered for that. And that resonates with that young consumer. So we have to find social reasons for existing, and I see a lot of people up here that actually do a pretty good job of that. Diversity. Civil rights drove change. Today, the millennial social and ethnic diversity drive change. So it's diversity. When you think about your tasting rooms, are they people that all look like me that talk about warm days, cool nights, pHs, and all that stuff? Or do they have gauges in their ear, and do they have sleeves? Do they say shit a lot? This young consumer has a tendency to have a potty mouth, far more than my generation, but we need a little bit more shit in the tasting room, I think. Can I say shit? Landfills and waste. Disposable culture, my generation. We're the greatest wasters of all time, I think. But, the action for this young consumer, packaging, carbon footprint, sustainability. Spending, my generation, conspicuously, our Jordache jeans, our Izod, our BMW. Millennial, they're aspirational. And by the way, there are 2 data points about wine that I've seen. I'm not going to get too far into them because I'm not sure how reliable they are, but there are 2 data points. And what it says is that the young consumer, when they do buy wine online, they are buying the most expensive bottles of all the cohorts. Now, they're not buying the most expensive case. That's still the boomers. But they're buying the most expensive single bottle per bottle price. So what I get out of that is the young consumer is aspirational to wine. They're giving it for gifts and special occasions. So we got to pull them into what we do. That's a good sign. But they spend on important things. I think they might view wine as being fun, aspirational. But we have to improve wine value, and we have to hit on these important points that they care about. And one of them being fun, and so we have to embed that into tasting room events and marketing. So coming down the home stretch here, this is one of the things that Spirits has over us. We don't have a mixologist in wine. We really don't. When you go into a bar, this is what you get. This guy, pours things, they blow up on fire, and he's got these botanicals that are all in this nice little neat thing, and he sprinkles it over with flair. He's hammering on these mint and things like that, jamming it. It's a craft cocktail. It's a lot less expensive than a glass of wine. It's entertainment. That's fun. Places where people are actually drinking now. Think about this in relation to a tasting room as an example. Kaiser Tiger. In spring, it's a beer hall. In winter, it's curling lanes. This is, by the way, these are all chains. It's not single places. Flight Club, social darts, kind of like the old pub darts. Ping pong. This is Ace Bounce. More social venues. Shuffleboard. Royal Palms. And this one, I love, Bad Axe. Because it's axe throwing, and I checked before I got up here. There's no place in Portland. Anybody do this? There are a few. Okay, I didn't see any in Seattle or Portland. They have them in San Francisco. I don't know why they trust San Francisco more than Portland, but this is Bad Axe. I mean, that's what could go wrong with drinking and throwing axes. Looks like fun to me. But all of these places are ingrained with fun, and so this is where success comes from. A lot of the spirits makers now, spirits manufacturers and beer manufacturers, they're serving their spirits, their wine, their beer, or whatever, in these places where there's fun and there's socialization. This lateral socialization ends up being one of the keys that we have to think about for success. Our idea of fun. Hello, sir. This is the wine that you've ordered, isn't it? It was produced, harvested in November of 1997. It's a pH of, may I pour? From my generation, we thought that was pretty cool because, our parents, most of us came from nothing. And, to kind of be waited on like that, we felt fancy. That kind of felt good to us. And they served us salad that wasn't just iceberg. We didn't know lettuce came in different things. So this resonated with us. We thought this was cool. This was a sign of success. And so we liked this. This worked for us. It's not going to work at all for this young generation. This is what tasting rooms look like today. And if you have a tasting room that's filled with gray-haired people, you're making a mistake. You're going to have to figure out a way around that. And by the way, I'll tell a quick story. I have a couple minutes, it looks like. I think. So my daughter just graduated from medical school, thank you. Before she went off to medical school, she worked at a winery for a while. And then some of her friends from Cal Berkeley came, and she wanted to, while she was at home for medical school, she wanted to take them to a winery. And I said, well, honey, let me set you up. I know where I can set you. Oh, no, that's okay, Dad. I can do it. And I thought she was being a big girl. I can do it myself. And I thought, all right, that's cool. I really wanted to help her. And she said no. So she went off to some place. And when she got back, I said, well, where'd you go? She went someplace in Napa Carneros. I'd never heard of it. Why'd you go there? Because their tasting fees were low, comparatively. And they had cornhole. Really? What about the wine quality? Oh, it's good. All right. So really today, wine is, we all make good wine. We can describe it in different ways, but we're so locked into describing our wine being different, we're forgetting the experience. We're forgetting everything else that comes with it. And as it turns out, they also didn't go inside the tasting room because when they looked inside the tasting room, it was filled with gray-haired people, and they didn't want to go in and look dumb. That's what she told me. Here's a person that's graduated from medical school, and she didn't want to look dumb because she didn't understand it, even though she'd worked a harvest for 1 year. So that's another thing to think about. When we're putting up gilded tasting rooms, it's probably a turnoff. If we don't have those people with gauges and sleeves that say shit, that's probably a mistake too. And by the way, your outdoors is probably a great place to bring in young consumers. So here's the way some of the product manufacturers, consumer product good manufacturers are selling wine. Coca-Cola, you think wine's got trouble? Try having all of the vending machines taken out of every school in America and having your product tied to diabetes. And, that's what Coke and Pepsi have had to deal with. So what do? They start talking about calories. Well, wait a second. Coke is very, very heavy in sugar and calories. Well, not if you put it down to 7.5 ounces. You just change it. You make a small can. And by the way, those sales of those small cans are just going off the roof. You can talk about it as being clean. What is clean? There's no definition. Is wine clean? Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Causes, those play into it. Another example, Chips Ahoy, just change the serving size, and then you can change the number of calories. 3.5 grams of fat, 140 grams of sodium. All these things, we can't, as permit holders, actually talk about the health benefits of what we do, but we can talk about health-related things like this. Here's an interesting one, 90 milligrams of natural caffeine. It's natural caffeine. What the hell is natural caffeine? I don't know what it is, but the young consumers love it. So, for God's sakes, let's have natural wine, which, by the way, has no definition either. And it's taking off because younger consumers are looking at it. I'm talking to Elizabeth. Where are you? There is one of our newest employees, and she just came out of New York, and somebody told me a story that natural wine in New York is just a thing now with young consumers, yeah? Yeah, it's not surprising to me at all. 0 calories. So calories end up being important. Non-GMO ingredients. I'm told to wrap up. I have 3 minutes, but I'm almost wrapped up. Having actually a variety when you're selling, that's one of the things that's really taken off right now is the White Claw is selling in variety packs because people are looking at sampling. So as we're thinking about bringing new consumers in and sampling, think about how to spread that across a few different things. Again, non-GMO. We can say non-GMO. We can say gluten-free. Those are totally legit. No artificial sweeteners. Here's, if you want, you can put these badges. You can be certified. Well, I'm certified, but you can actually have somebody that's certifying your product. Again, back to natural. No artificial sweeteners. These are things that we can say. We can use the none. Organic, gluten-free. Organic's a little iffy still, I think, for the wine category generally. Artisanal is another thing that we can say that's attractive. USDA is another one of these brands. And then Kettle One is an interesting one to me because Kettle One was really having problems until they put the term botanical on it. And so once they put botanical, made with vodka distilled with real botanicals and infused with natural flavor. Real botanicals, not fake botanicals, and natural flavor, not imitation flavor. And again, there's no definition, but this is the way people are marketing right now. So we got to move away from long days and cool nights. I had to pick a back label off of somebody not in our country to not piss. I can piss the guys off in New Zealand, but so here's an example of the way. From the breathtaking, beautiful region of central Otago, New Zealand, with unique glacial soils and pure mountain air, comes the 214 12th Night Pinot Noir. This sustainably grown wine has aromas of dark forest fruit, underlying notes of cardamom, and bright acidity, fine grain tannins, yada, 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 yada. All good with steak, yada, yada, yada. This is an example of somebody I think is pretty evolved right now. It's a new winery. They have these like emojis, DNA grown in Paso, green, grapes from sustainably farmed vineyards, 100% solar, best friends. They got chicken, taco, whatever. Some of the Wine Geek stuff, they put them down at the bottom. So they're kind of including both things, but they're putting it in a way that's actually attractive to a younger consumer, and I think the older consumer can get along with it. So the secret to alpha growth, and this is my last slide, connect with old and young generations. Don't create or perpetuate your parents' tasting room. Consider activity and outdoors as part of this change. Internet sales, we can do better than 3%. That's what we're doing right now. When luxury sells 17% online. There's a lot of work that we have to do with creating this engine that goes back and forth between consumer club members and back to buying online in our own wineries. Sell a destination, values, brand concept, then sell wine. It's not about, you can't say, I'm going to let the bottle speak for itself. You can't say that anymore. There's a lot more stuff you have to do. Boots on the street in the U.S., regional focus. Take the side hustle economy. Take your thing on the road. One of my customers just opened up a tasting room in a very high net worth region, and they're staffing it. It's just another rollout of Napa kind of, but in this one region. So it's actually being quite successful. Lots of ways to take your show on the road, and I think we'll find more and more people doing that. It's already happening. Big data. That's a long story, but we really have to get better at that. Wine Direct has got a data component. On-ramp your your consumer. You got to find ways to have two lenses for every kind of event and project. One, what does it do for older consumers? What does it do for younger consumers? Look at every single project that you're doing with those two things in mind. It's okay to aspire or to attract an older consumer. It's okay to attract a younger consumer. You can do either if you want, but look at it through both lenses. And I did finish with 1 minute and 57 over. Tom?
Thank you, Rob. That was just absolutely excellent. I'm taking my chances shaking your hand after the, I'll move it out here. Anyway, thank you, Rob, for those great insights. It's great to have Rob here. He brings not only the analytics, but the tremendous benefit of experienced insights from having watched our category not only for years, but from almost every global perspective. Thank you again for that, Rob.